Hello everybody and welcome back to the Class Dojo. Today what we're going to be talking about is how to convert fractions to decimals. When we're converting these fractions to decimals, today our main focus is converting the fractions into tenths. Now I want everybody to say tenths with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, tenths. If you notice, I'm really emphasizing that THS at the end. The first fraction we're going to learn today is 1/10. And if you notice when I say that 1/10, it sounds like the tenths we're dealing with. I say that there's a 1 in my numerator. So if I wanted to draw this model out, I'd have 1 shaded. And I have a 10 in my denominator, so I have 10 equal parts. I have 1/10 shaded. Okay, now we've already learned about fractions. We learned that a fraction is a part of a whole. And now we're going to relate this to decimals or to money. If I had 1 dime, that'd be 1/10 of $1. I know it's only part of a dollar. So if I want to do an HTO chart, I don't have a full dollar. I don't have anything in my ones, but I have part of it. So I have 1/10. So I would put my 1 in my tenths place value. And if I wrote this out, it would be written in word form as 1/10. If you notice, I'm not saying 1/10 because I don't have anything in my tens place value. I only have a 1 in my tenth place value. Okay, now let's try this with my fraction 2/10. Everybody say 2/10 with me. Ready, set, go. 2/10. I notice in my numerator that I have 2 fraction bars shaded. I have 2 shaded out of a total of 10 equal parts. So my fraction is 2/10 and the model that represents is 2/10. Well, everybody, I'm still noticing that tenths. So in a decimal, I'm going to have 2/10. If you notice, I'm saying the same thing. It just looks differently. I'm kind of renaming it. So I have 2 shaded in my tenths place value. I don't have a full 1 whole. I don't have anything in my tens place value, but I have 2 shaded in my tenths place value. If I written this in word form, it would be 2/10. And that tenths means it's smaller than 1 whole. It's only a part of a whole. Okay, let's keep going. Let's try this with, you probably guessed it now, 3/10. Now I'm thinking, if I had to go to my model for my 3/10, how many is going to be shaded? You guessed it. 3 whole fraction bars are going to be shaded out of a total of 10 equal parts because my numerator is 3 and my denominator is 10. So I have 3/10 shaded. Okay, now let's keep going. My decimal, I know that I'm not going to have 1 full decimal. I'm going to have 3/10. And basically, this is like saying I have 3 dimes. Does 3 dimes equal 1 whole dollar? No, it equals about 30 cents. So I have 3/10. So if I read that in word form, it would be 3/10. I don't have 3 wholes. I don't have 3/10, which would be 30. I have 3/10, which means it's only part of a whole, and that's what that decimal says. It's saying that it's part of a whole, or it's less than 1 whole. Okay, with 4/10, I'd have 4 shaded out of a total of 10 pieces. I'd write my decimal as 4/10. And if I wrote it out, it'd be 4/10. Okay, now it's your. We are going to try with 5/10. Okay, so now we're going to go to the model. And I want you to think about how many pieces out of 10 are going to be shaded in. Okay, I want you to tell me your answer on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. If you guessed 5 pieces were going to be shaded at a total of 10, you are correct. The reason why is because my numerator is 5 and my denominator is 10. Okay, so now let's go to what we're really trying to focus on today, is my decimal. Am I going to have anything in my hundreds place value? No. Am I going to have anything in my tens place value? No. Just because I see a 10 right here does not mean I'm going to have anything in my tens, because I know my fraction is a part of a whole. It's not the whole thing. So I don't have anything in my tens place value. Am I going to have anything in my ones place value? No, I'm not going to have anything in my ones place value. Just because I see a 5 as my numerator does not mean it's going to be in my ones place. I don't have 5 groups of 1. I only have part of a whole. So I'm going to put my 5 in my tens place value. I have 0 decimal, because I don't have any ones. I have 0 decimal 5/10. If I wrote that in word form, it would just be as I read it, 5/10, or as I say it, 5/10. Okay? Now my new fraction is going to be 6/10. If I know that in my model 6 groups are going to be shaded, how many total equal groups do you think there's going to be? And this question is referring to my denominator. If you guessed 10 equal groups, you are correct. I have 10 equal groups to equal that one whole. Okay, so now here comes the difficult part. How would you say 6/10 as a decimal? I would say 6/10 as a decimal by putting a 0 in my ones place value, because not a whole model is shaded. Put my decimal point. Always got to point it. It's not a comma this time. It's a point to separate my wholes from my parts. And now I have my tenths. And I put my 6 in my tenths place value. So I have 6/10. I have 7/10 would be represented as 7/10. I have 7 groups shaded out of a total of 10. I put my 7 in my 10th place value, and I'd read this as 7/10. Let me keep going. I'm going to kind of speed through the next two, because you guessed it, it's going to be 8/10. I'm going to have 8 shaded out of a total of 10. I have 0 in my ones place value. I can put my decimal point in 8 in my tens place value. And now I would have 8/10. Now if you notice, we're getting closer to that one whole filled. I still have 9/10. So if you notice in my model, I'm going to have 9 shaded at a total of 10. Now everything up to this point has been pretty repetitive. It's been the same, where I have 0 in my one holes at my decimal, and I put my 9 in my 10th place value, because I know it's part of a whole. I have 9/10. Now you're probably asking yourself, what would I do if I got 10 out of 10 shaded? Okay, so we're still going to do the same steps. I'm looking at my numerator. My numerator is 10. So I'm going to have 10 pieces shaded out a total of 10 pieces. So 10/10. 10/10 as a decimal. This is where it's going to look a little different. I notice now that in my model, I have one whole shaded. This is like saying if I had 10 dimes. I'm going to switch this a little differently. I cannot write a 10 in my tens place value. So I have to bump that one whole into my ones place value because now I have one whole. Oh my goodness. I know that 10 tenths is equal to one whole. And if I notice in my hundreds tens place value, I can't write a 10 in that tenths. I have to bump it over to my ones place value. So when I say 10 tenths, it is also equivalent or equal to one whole. And I can see that in my model. Try another one like that. Okay, I think you're ready for a challenge now. If I read this mixed number, I would read this as 2 and 6 tenths. So now I'm thinking about my model. I'm visualizing this. Let's say I'm visualizing some chocolate, maybe. I love chocolate. I know I'm going to have 2 whole chocolate bars. That 2 standing by itself, that whole number is representing 2 wholes. Now, I took care of my fraction. Or, I'm sorry, excuse me. I took care of my whole number. Now, let's take care of my fraction. I know that a fraction is a part of a whole, so the whole thing is not going to be colored in. I know that I'm going to take care of my numerator first. I'm going to shade in 6 out of a total of 10 equal pieces. So when I draw, excuse me, when I draw my 2 and 6 tenths, I see that it's going to be 2 wholes with 6 tenths. Okay, now here comes the difficult part. We've already knew how to draw my fraction, draw my model. Now I'm thinking about this as a decimal. Okay. Now, if you notice when I say 2, when I read this fraction, I read 2 and 6 tenths. Okay, I want you to say this with me. Ready? 2 and 6 tenths. Let's do this one more time because when I show you what's on this next little part, you're going to be like, what? That's crazy. Okay, ready? Let's say it one more time together. 3, 2, 1. 2 and 6 tenths. Are you guys ready for me to show you something? Bada bing, bada boom. When I read this decimal, I read it 2, and where that period is, or that decimal point, I read it 2 and 6 tenths. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I know that I can see in my model 2 holes shaded in. I have 2 holes or 2 ones. And when I see that and, I'm taking part of that whole to have 6 tenths. So when I read this decimal, it's not 2.6. It's 2 wholes and 6 tenths. It's 2 and 6 tenths. So if I wrote it 2 and 6 tenths, and I know that 6 is tenths, so it's part of a whole. I don't have 3 whole groups. Let's try it again. Are you ready? Now, I think you guys are getting smart, obviously, so let's try another one. Dun, dun, dun. My fraction. Okay, I want you guys to try to read this by yourself right now. Think about it. I want you to say it out loud because whenever I'm dealing with fractions going to decimals, I'm always thinking about how to say that out loud. Okay, give you a second. Okay. if you said, okay, let's break it down. I have a mixed number here. I have a whole and a fraction. So now as I read this mixed number, I'm going to say my whole number 1 and 3/10. 1 and 3/10. Let's look at this as a model. I'm going to have one whole fraction bar shaded. That one whole is going to be 10 parts out of 10 shaded. I took care of my whole number 1. Now let's take care of my fraction. My numerator is 3, so I'm going to have 3 shaded in out of a total of 10 equal groups. So that would be 3/10. If I see this model, even as I see the model, I read it as one whole and 3/10. If you notice, I'm saying that and because I have two different models. I have two different groups. Okay. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does this look like as a decimal? I asked myself first, do I have any whole groups? Do I have anything in my ones? And the answer is yes. I have one whole, so I have 1 in my ones place value. As I say this fraction, I say 1 and 3/10. Oh my gosh, so I have put 1 in my ones place value. I do my decimal point as my and then I put a 3 in my 10th place value because I have 1 and 3/10. In word form, I would write it out as 1, because I have 1 whole, and 3/10. When I have that 3/10, that's showing it's less than 1. I cannot write 1 and 3/10 because that'd be 31. Is our answer 31? No, it's 1 and 3/10. Okay, let's try. I think this might be the last one. Your fraction. And if you want, pause the video and try to write the decimal out yourself. Maybe draw the model, write the decimal and word form out. That's really good practice. That's taking learning into your own hands. Don't wait for this to just give you the video, but try it yourself right now since we've done a couple, and then go back and check your answer. Okay, so my fraction, if I read this out loud, is 2 and 6/10. Or I have 2 wholes and 6/10 because I see a mixed number, I have a whole number, and a fraction. If I drew this out as a model, I'm going to have 2 wholes shaded. Yup, you see it there. 2 wholes completely shaded. Nothing. Took care of that 2 as my whole number. Now that I took care of my whole, let's take care of my fraction. I have 6/10. 6/10. My numerator is 6, so I'm going to have 6 shaded out of a total of 10 equal groups. So my model shows 6, or excuse me, says 2 and 6/10. I have 2 and 6/10. Okay, now in my decimal place, I'm thinking, do I have any hundreds? No, I don't have any hundreds. Oh my goodness gracious, no, that's too large. Now, do I have any tens? Tens, T-E-N-S. And the answer is no. I don't have groups of 10 at all. That's way too large. But I do have ones. I have 2 groups of 1. And if I see that digit 2, that's what that represents. So I would put a 2 in my ones place value. And I don't just have 2. I have 2 and a fraction. And I know that a fraction is a part of a whole. So when I'm saying this, I say 2 and 6/10. I'm putting that 2 from that wholes. And my fraction as 6/10. tenths because it's part of a whole. The tenths is smaller. Even as I say my fraction, 2 and 6 tenths, when I write that decimal 2 and 6 tenths, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. It just looks different. 2 and, because I have 2 whole groups, and 6 tenths. Remember, in that THS makes it that group smaller in my HTO chart. Okay. And here's just what each one would look like. This is a great guide for reference if you're trying problems on your own. This is a great way to see the model, the fraction, the decimal, and the word form for dealing with tenths. Okay? Today, you learned how to make fractions or convert fractions to decimals dealing with tenths. And right before you go, I want us all to say tenths 3 times in a old man voice. I think old man voice are really funny, okay? So we're going to say tenths 3 times in an old man voice just to drill in the fact we are dealing with tenths, which is part of a whole. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Tenths, tenths, tenths. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming today to watch this video on how to convert fractions to decimals. Stay tuned for the video that will be coming out on Friday, where we step it up a notch. No longer are we dealing with fractions and decimals to tenths. We're going to be going to somewhere else.